You are listening to the Next Play podcast, the playbook for high-performing leaders who want to exceed their full potential. From walking on the Ole Miss football team at 5'7", 150 pounds and earning a full D1 scholarship, to coaching thousands around the world and working with massive organizations like IBM. I've learned countless lessons that I'll be sharing right here with you. Join me as I interview some of the most successful people so you too can learn how to focus on always moving forward by deciding, planning, and executing on the next play relentlessly. This is Richie with the Next Play podcast, and today I have a very special guest by the name of Lyndsay Dowd. She is a executive leadership coach, and what really stood out to me, what makes her super unique, is that not only, first of all, we're going to hear a lot about Heartbeat for Hire, but she has 23 years of corporate experience in SaaS, but at a big company, IBM. So her experience is very thorough, very deep. She has experience in software sales, channels, leadership, management, diversity, storytelling. But how she came up with Heartbeat for Hire is what we're going to dive in today, and some of the things that you can use with your teams to improve culture, enthusiasm, tenacity, and all those fun things that go with it. So, Lyndsay, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Richie. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So let's just jump into it. Tell me the story. Where does Heartbeat for Hire come from? It's really unique. It's different, and I really like it. So where did it come from? What is it?
Oh, thank you. So let me start by just sharing a little bit of my story, because I think that will help you understand why Heartbeat for Hire exists. So as you said, I spent 23 years with IBM. I've been in sales for 25 years. And, I climbed the ranks. I did individual contributor roles. I started in customer service, and I went all the way up into the executive ranks. And I learned a lot, and I had some really tremendous examples of leadership. I had some wonderful leaders, and I had some not so great leaders. And I left IBM and I went to another company, and I was just there a very short time. And I got fired, and nobody in my world could do that math. They were all kind of like, how do you go from 23 years to going to another company and getting fired? That doesn't make any sense. And what I ended up realizing was I was in a really toxic culture, and it was an extremely troubling experience. I was very anxious. I was not myself. I wasn't able to rely on my instincts or my ability to read people, which is kind of my superpower. And after I got fired, it was a real kick in the gut. I had incredible track record. I had lots of awards. I had high performing teams. It was never something I expected to find myself in the middle of, but I took a breath, and this was all during the Great Resignation. This was all during the pandy. So there was a lot of tumult and a lot of trouble and a lot of change going on all around me. And I took a breath and I said, what am I good at? What do I love to do? And how can I help people the most? And what I did was I wrote this job description, and the job description was this Chief Heartbeat Officer. And what that was really a function of sales. It was working with all of the sales leaders to help them be the best managers that they can be, so they can really generate results. And the truth of the matter is, when your people are happy, they're 6 times more productive. It's that simple. And there's science behind it. It's not just Lyndsay's theory here. It's actually real. And so I started interviewing with a ton of companies, and these companies would say, you could do so many things. What do you want to do? And I'd say, I want to be your Chief Heartbeat Officer. And they'd say, well, we don't have that. We love it. We need it, but we don't have that. And so I kept hearing that over and over again. And I said, okay, I'm going to build it. And so I built this company, and what I do is I coach leaders and I coach executive leadership teams, and I speak to companies about creating this irresistible sales culture that drives results. So that's what Heartbeat for Hire is about.
I love it. I love it. So how does it work? How does Heartbeat for Hire specifically work? Like, how are you able to drive these results? Walk me through kind of the science behind it. What does that look like? How exactly does it work?
There are a lot of experts out there. In fact, I had an expert on my podcast not too long ago, Craig Dowden, and he actually is a scientist, and he has a degree in business, and his background is all around business and culture. And it was a fascinating conversation because it really helped justify a lot of what I do from a scientific perspective. But the truth of the matter is, and I did this myself because I was running big organizations for IBM. When your team is happy, when they feel engaged, they're going to take risks. They're going to develop new best practices. They're going to rise up. They're going to challenge themselves. They're going to support each other. There's going to be a greater sense of community and trust. And I saw that with my own eyes. And I've certainly been on the receiving ends of great culture and really poor culture. So how I do it is typically, in order to drive the most permanence, which is really what I strive for. Yes, I can work with VPs of sales, but VPs of sales are often temporary. So they'll be 2-3 years and they move on to another role. So to really get that permanence that we're looking for, I really look to work with the C-suite. So COOs and CEOs, CHROs, those are all ideal people to really engage with. And there's a few different things that I do. In some cases, we'll do group leadership coaching where I'm just coaching across the executive leadership team or the ELT. Or we'll do one-on-one, or I speak to the companies, and a lot of companies hire me for their women's organizations, or I'm speaking to a group of 300 leaders next month for another company. It really depends on their needs. But the cool thing that's happening, Richie, is that we're having this conversation. And if the Great Resignation taught us one thing, it taught us that people want to feel valued and seen, and they won't tolerate just being told, it's your job, just do it. They want to feel a sense of purpose. They want to feel a sense of belonging, and they want to feel that their contributions matter. So all of those things help define culture. And culture, it's really funny. I'm working with a company right now, and they're very data-driven and analytical. And it's not an easy thing for them to just say, oh yeah, culture, I get it. Like they really want to see the numbers behind it. And that's not always an easy thing to show. But I'm going to give you a visual, and this is a really simple one. So a friend said to me, a leader I really respect, she said, when your boss calls you, does the hair on your neck stand up, or are you excited to take the call? And that is just a really simple indication of how do I feel about where I'm at. And culture is definitely a feeling. It's not just diversity. It's not just inclusion. It's not just a sense of belonging. It's having pride of place. It's feeling that sense of community. And when you can build that, and culture is not just ping pong tables and free beer. Those are perks. Those are nice. And I don't poo-poo those, but that's not necessarily culture. Culture is really that sense of place that any leader really wants to have for their company. When it's good, people are shouting from the rooftops. They're talking about it on social. They're talking about it on LinkedIn. They're referring people into the organization. And that's where most leaders really want to be. They just don't always know how to get there. So that's what I try and help them understand.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely want to talk about that today. It's just like, how do you get there? Right. I want to break down your method or your model for doing that. But I want to talk about measurables really quick, because you brought this up. And I think as a business owner or CEO or any C-level, obviously there's return, there's measurables. What does it look like? And so culture is really challenging, because what is the measurable? How do you measure happiness? How do you measure joy? And I think that's a fun topic. So from your perspective, obviously, so some of the things I guess that you would hear are, well, your retention would improve, or your attrition rate, or things like, but what specifically, like, how do you gauge happiness in a workplace, and how do you speak to that for people that are working there? Like, how do you teach that, and how do you measure happiness?
You're right. I mean, measuring happiness is not a tangible like checkbox that you're going to survey your people and they're going to be like, are you happy? Half the people won't answer it at all. So, that's not going to be a real simple gauge. But one thing that I do in my methodology, and this is a practice that I did as a manager, and there is one question that I tell managers they need to ask. And very few people have been trained on this, but I did it myself, and it's a very humbling question. But the question that you ask is, how can I be the best manager for you? And this is what I call inverted management. And what this does, when you implement this company-wide, the people at the top can tap on any leader's shoulder and say, tell me what's going on your team. And by asking that question, you're going to have some really good information. First of all, you're going to start to establish trust. And when you start to establish trust, there's all kinds of magic that will come out of it. But they're also going to tell you what they need. And the reality is everybody's at a different spot in their career. So based on tenure, based on experience, based on career goals, family life, whatever it is, we all need different things. But
Right.
being able to communicate what they need, some people need training, some people want role playing, some people want a coach, some people just don't feel fulfilled in their job and they want a different job. But if you're not having those conversations, you don't know. So there's a very well-known company, Salesforce, that has someone in place in-house, and his job is essentially working with every, I think it's VP level and above across the organization. And he does just that. He wants to know, where are we across the organization? What teams are having trouble? Who do we have flight risks from? And that way, their leadership can say at any time, tell me what's going on in this part of the business. And having that kind of information is your happiness gauge. That is the ability to really say, okay, something's wrong over here. We're not getting information. Or you can find out real quick if they're not even asking the question. And if they're not asking the question, you got a bigger problem on your hands with that leader. But that question, when I asked it, I will tell you, it's a very surprising question. You are admitting you don't know everything. And that is humbling in and of itself. And so many people are taught, well, I'm in a position of power, so I have to look like I know what I'm doing. But
Right.
you're being vulnerable, you're being authentic, you're making yourself accessible. And that is a sign of a good leader. So I don't know if that fully answered your question, but those are some tools that I use to implement to really help you understand the health of the company. And I think it's a wealth of information you can get from your people. And when you start to build those conversations into your regular practice, there's so much more conversation that comes out of it. And all of a sudden you have new connection points for your people. It just becomes a richer place to work.
I like that. I like that. And so do you typically work like within, like, because of your experience in SaaS, or are you finding that you're outside of SaaS? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I thought when I started building Heartbeat for Hire, I was going to be all tech and all sales, and that's where I was going to be. And the truth of the matter is, what I teach, turns out it works okay for just about anything. So it's not necessarily just sales. I'm definitely not restricted to just SaaS, but I'm working with 2 companies in the legal space right now, and I didn't expect to be working there. It doesn't matter to me that they're in the legal space. The problems are pretty similar across the board. But these people have issues with their culture, and they're rapidly growing, and they're struggling with, how do we grow? But if we put our nose towards culture, is that going to slow us down? And the answer is no. If anything, it's going to help you grow faster.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't expect that that's where I would end up, Richie, but it's just the nature of the beast and how people find me. So I'm not opposed to working with any sales organizations or any companies. The focus is truly just, building that irresistible culture to drive results.
Nice. So let's talk about your model. So what's so if it's like, okay, we want to implement and add this culture, how does that work?
Yeah. So because it's my company, I can be fairly flexible, but the reality is, what I like to do is work with executive leadership teams, and I will spend some time doing some interviews. I'll understand what the kind of the main undercurrent of the issues are. We'll do a ground rules, like level set. This is what it is. This is what it isn't. I'm not teaching your people sales training. That's not why I'm here. You have people that can do that. This is focused on building that culture and helping you grow. So we start there, and then often we'll go into group coaching across the executive leadership team. Sometimes I'll get asked to do one-on-one coaching, which is totally cool. Sometimes I just get asked to speak to companies, and it can be all hands calls or keynotes or that sort of thing. So it really depends on the needs of what they've got. I'm working with a company right now that's probably a couple thousand people. I'm working with another company right now that's 60 people. And then I'm working with another company that's like 50,000 people. So it really runs the gamut on size, and it depends on what it is they need. But I have some topics that I love to hit on that really kind of drive that change. And those are kind of the cornerstones of the success.
Yeah. So what are some of those topics, or what's your
Sure.
favorite one? Like
So
what's the most popular one today that you're seeing?
So, oh, well, there's a couple, but I'll give you one that it was really impactful for me. And I think it's just so critical. And that's called building a culture of advocacy. And advocacy is different than mentorship. Mentorship can be hit or miss. And mentorship really depends on two people really connecting and committing to meet regularly over time. And sometimes it works, more often it doesn't, and it falls off the calendar, and you have good intentions, but it just doesn't last. So building a culture of advocacy is something different. And what that really is allowing people the latitude to reach across organizations and out of your direct line of reports to connect with other leaders, and not just connect, but being able to say, I heard you speak on that call. I've been impressed with what you've done. Would you be open to a conversation? Yeah, sure. I'd love to. You have that conversation, then all of a sudden that leader is exposed to a rising star they would have no knowledge of. And the reason I'm so passionate about this is because it helped me so many times find new jobs within IBM. And one of those stories was someone said, you need to go and talk to this woman, Melinda. I think she's hiring. I think you guys would really like each other. So I went and spoke to her. And the first question she said was, Lyndsay, tell me your story. So I told her my story. I gave her some of my background. And I said, based on what you heard, do you think you have any openings on your team? And she said, based on what I heard, I have 5. And I said, well, I don't need 5. I only need 1. But, tell me what you got. And she goes, I'm going to tell you each and you can pick. And this worked out for me several times within IBM, and I was tapped on the shoulder to run a number of new businesses, but I would never have had those opportunities if I didn't have the ability to go and speak to these other leaders, or if people weren't saying, you've got to meet her because she's got something to say and she's going to change the way this business works. So giving your leaders the permission and giving your employees the permission to go outside their reporting chain and be heard, be seen, and be talked about is an incredibly empowering thing. So that's one. I'd say another one that I'm getting a whole lot of interest about, and this was not my intention, was creating your personal brand. And in the corporate world, we are not taught to do that. Your brand is your job. And I am kind of the one going, no, that's not true. That is not your brand. Your brand is, what do they say about you when you leave the room? And so talking about how to leverage tools like LinkedIn, and who are you when you're not doing this job, and what do you want your message to the world to be? That's a really interesting conversation that I get to talk a lot about. But I have a couple of others if you're interested.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that's an interesting topic because, a lot of, especially in the sales world, a lot of companies want their sales reps to begin posting content and building their brand. I think corporate America was afraid to do that in the past because they didn't want anybody saying dumb stuff or ruining the company, or they probably don't want losing, you don't want to lose people if they're posting a lot to other companies who could then recruit them. So
that's the point that I love, Richie, because I hear this a lot when I say, getting someone to teach your people how to build their corporate brand is an investment in your people. And the first question I hear is, well, what if they leave? And I say, well, what if they stay?
Mm-hmm.
And if you teach them, and all of a sudden this person now has all this knowledge of, oh, wow, I can have a much louder voice than I thought. And I have all kinds of ways to do this. All of a sudden they're talking about your company. They're saying all the good things that you're doing. And if your culture is healthy, these people are screaming from the rooftops. And wouldn't it be cool if they were doing it in a very modern way that makes your company look really good?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an interesting topic that, so you go in and just share like strategies on how people can do that. Like,
I mean, I don't do huge deep dives on it. There are experts out there that this is all they do. But I
Right.
certainly have enough experience in building my own brand and understanding what that is supposed to look like. But on LinkedIn, there are some very simple first things that you can do where you can capture real estate very quickly. When someone hovers over your name, a little box pops up. What's in that box is the most important real estate there is. You
Right.
want, when someone looks at your name, they're going to get it in those first few words. Who is that person? And
Right.
for me, mine's slightly provocative because people are like, Chief Heartbeat Officer, what the heck is that? I've never heard of that. So either it makes people question it, or they're curious and then they want to dig a little more and maybe they watch a few posts. But the idea is to let people see who you are really easily. And
Right.
that's something we're not taught to do in corporate America.
So do you ever see like this position that you are, or you're coming into companies, do you ever see your business maybe ever being in a place where you actually help companies create this role and then fill it? And
Yeah.
like, do you know what I'm
I would
saying? As a
I would love that. That's a dream, Richie, honestly. And what's interesting is I've seen a big shift, and you're now seeing a lot of roles like chief people officer, chief
right,
well-being officer. And I love seeing that because, right now we're talking about mental health, right? And this was, I think, World Mental Health Day was yesterday.
oh,
And
was it?
people are looking at people much more comprehensively than they ever have before. So you're no longer just a job, you are a whole person, and how a company looks after that whole person really matters. So the fact that these jobs are coming into existence, and I think, Gary Vaynerchuk has a chief heart officer. So there are these roles out there that are doing this kind of work. And it tells me that there is a need. It tells me there's a shift. And I think that's good for everybody. So yeah, ideally helping companies figure out what is this job and how do
Right.
we leverage it. I think it's brilliant. Of course,
So
I'm doing it. So yeah, of course
right, right.
I
So what's this Gary V role? Chief Heart, what is that? He
So he
hired
has a
someone for that?
woman
What?
named Claude Silver, who is his chief heart officer. She posts fairly regularly, and she looks after the heart of the company for him. And he's got a pretty massive company, so it's a big role. But Gary V leads with heart, and that's a pretty profound way to lead. Now, Gary's style is very in your face and lots of profanity, and he's very aggressive with his message, but his message is real similar to mine. And it's, consider the people around you and understand that they're what make you successful. So if you take good care of them, they'll take good care of your clients. And, Richard
Right.
Branson is the same. He always says, if I take care of my people, they take care of the clients. There are a lot of really brilliant leaders out there that get this concept, and
Right.
their people are loyal to them as a result. So I get a lot of people that reach out to me and will tell me about, my company has really great culture. And whenever I hear that, I'm like, oh, tell me more. I want to know, because
Right.
all of those stories are so helpful for the leaders that are trying to figure it out.
Right. So can you walk me through like what the day-to-day would be for that lady, for example, the chief heart officer, for someone of a
Well, I
company
can't
like
speak
that?
of
Like,
Claude, but I can
but in
certainly speak of
general, like this
what this
role.
would be. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, in my mind, if you are implementing inverted management, so asking that question, how can I be the best manager for you? By having this person in a role that's collecting that information, that is kind of interfacing back with all of the different leaders and acting as a coach. So this person helps you resolve or helps you navigate sticky situations. And listen, in every company, whether you're small or large, you are going to have HR issues, you are going to have personnel issues, you're going to have leave of absence, and all of these things, or layoffs, you're going to have to navigate through, and they're not easy. So how do you do it with ease, and how do you do it with care and kindness? That's really the role. So it's an interface with HR, but it's really a function of leadership, and it's making sure that the company's cultural thread is strong, and making sure that as these issues arise, getting them handled quickly, making
Right.
sure that there isn't some long lasting, reverberation of yuck that happens when these things are poorly handled. Because I've
Right.
certainly been in those situations, and you can't get that taste out of your mouth for a very long time. So when something goes wrong, word travels very fast. So how you recover and how you step back into, we screwed up on something, we're going to own that, but how we rise up and fix it is really important. And I don't think enough leaders are trained on that.
Right. So they're so literally just coaching the leadership team
Yeah.
on, okay, so what's like the end result, right? Like, so we're, you're coaching their leadership team,
Yeah.
you're helping them resolve sticky situations.
Mhm.
How do you know you got it? How do you know the culture is there? Like, what is
Mhm.
there, and how do you know you're there?
So let me tell you how you know when you're not there, and then we'll be able to shift it really easily.
Okay.
So if you are having team calls and you ask some questions and it's crickets on the other end, you got a problem.
Mm,
If you are asking people to engage or jump in on projects and you're not getting any response, you've got a problem. People are leaving, you've got a
mm.
problem. If people that were once posting on social media are no longer posting, you've got a problem. So all of these things, when things are good, they all flip, and you start to see all of this engagement. You start to see referrals, you start to see posting again, you start to see people collaborating, you see community. But leaders, the other piece of what I teach, Richie, is fun. And if there is no fun, there is going to be less engagement. So part of this is teaching everyone and reminding people we spend more than half of our lives working. So we've got to make that enjoyable. We've got to make that a place where people want to go. And if
Right.
you're not thinking about that, I mean, I'll give you an example. During the pandy, when everybody kind of had to go back to their homes and work from home, the biggest fear of leaders was we were going to lose our ability to connect. And so one of the things that I did that worked really well was, I don't know how familiar you are with the Kahoot. But Kahoots are these kind of multimedia, multiple choice or true false quizzes. And there's pictures and there's music. And so I asked my team, I had a big organization, I asked them to each send me an interesting fact that no one knew about them. And I put together this quiz, and there was all these fun questions. And one of the questions that I asked was, this person has visited every major ballpark in North America but one. And so there was 4 answers. 3 of them were men, 1 of them was a woman, and everybody answered the guys. And it was the woman that was the one who had visited all the ballparks. And the answer came up, and everyone was like, oh, Marcia, well, everyone remembered that about Marcia. And there was 40 some odd questions on this quiz.
Wow.
But for all of these little nuggets, like, I didn't know you were a pickleball champion. You like off-roading? I love off-road. You're a fly fisherman? I'm a fly fisherman. All of these little nuggets created opportunity for connection, which created opportunity for private jokes and created opportunity for laughter. And all of a sudden, when you joined a call, it was no longer, we'll wait until she gets here before we say anything. It was, hey, did you go fishing this weekend? Or hey, visit any ballparks lately? And all of a sudden, there was this banter, there was excitement, there was seeing each other beyond the role. And that's something that leaders really have to provide. And I think in the pandemic, it got a little exhausting because everybody was feeling like, oh my God, I got to do more of this. And we did so many happy hours and coffee talks. And, there's definitely a balance, but being able to create those opportunities for connection. I know I had a leader once, and we were at a conference, and she's like, we're going to do a self-defense class. And all of a sudden, we had to all wake up early. We had to get in our gym clothes, and we came down to some hotel
Self-defense.
conference room, and we learned a self-defense class. And it happened to be from a black belt who was another seller in our organization. And he was amazing. And we learned so many good things, but that was a point of connection for all of us. And those moments are really important to our everyday work. And a lot of leaders will be like, Psh, that's fluffy, that's EQ, it's not important, but really it is. And, you're creating this place. If you're a C-level person, you're creating a place. You have to take care of your people. If you're not taking care of your people, why would they stay?
Yeah.
So it's just ways to find that connection, collaboration, and purpose.
How do you convince, an executive who is very data and analytic driven
Mhm.
to look at their culture that way and to say,
Yeah.
hey, this is worth an investment? Like, how do
Mm.
you, what's your, like, how do you, like, there's executives listening to this, right? And
Yeah.
they're like, well, how do you convince someone that, of all the things that are going on, why work on this?
Well, generally, if they're finding their way to me, they're already having a problem and they
Mm,
might not want to admit it. But
mm,
if they've lost people, people are expensive. Replacing people is really expensive. And you
for
don't want
sure.
to be in the position of having to lose people. So that's kind of the easy one to kind of call out. And the other one is reviews on Glassdoor or other places, Google, that post reviews of companies. You don't want to be the star of somebody's bad memory. So you really got to kind of remember that your reputation is at stake. So one of the things I try and explain to leaders is working with someone like me is not an admission of failure. It's an investment in your people. It's putting action behind your words. And I see sometimes leaders they'll dabble, they'll do a little post about culture and they'll be like, that checked that box, but did it? And your people can see through that. I was just talking to a
Right.
client just before this, who was like, yeah, my leader's starting to post a little bit about culture, but I don't really think they get it. And unfortunately, their people can see that. So you
Right.
really got to go beyond that. I will say that everything around us has evolved. So our technology has evolved. The way we talk about people has evolved. The way we refer to people's pronouns. I mean, there's so much that has changed. Leadership has changed. And that is a critical thing that leaders need to understand. And every once in a while, not every once in a while, fairly often, I run into leaders that will be like, I've been doing it this way for 20 years. I know what I'm doing. Okay. When was the last time you hired a coach? When was the last time you took a class or sharpened your skills? Because everything around you has changed. It doesn't mean
Right.
you're a bad leader, and it doesn't mean you're incapable of change. I know a ton of leaders who have confessed to me, Linz, I used to be an asshole and I've totally changed. And I'm so much better because of it.
Mm,
So, being able to see that your people need care and feeding, and they need a source of joy, and they need that connection with others, makes you a better leader. It doesn't make you a distracted leader. It makes you a more dynamic leader. And that's really what I try and teach leaders. I had a client, and this was really funny. I was telling him about my inverted management and how you asked that question. He goes, oh, I do that. I do that. And I said, oh, what do you say? Tell me. He said, oh, I tell them, tell me why I'm the biggest idiot in the room. I said, oh, okay. That's
that's
not
one way to word
exactly
it.
not exactly the approach I would recommend. And I'm going to guess that people aren't real comfortable telling you anything.
Right.
Maybe some of your peers would, but certainly not anyone in the field and not a first line manager. They're never going to come and tell you that. So, he had good intentions and he really was trying to get to the same thing I was trying to do. He just wasn't doing it in quite the way that people were ready to share. So,
What do you believe makes a great frontline manager? Like, if you
mm,
looked at leadership, what do you feel makes a great leader? What
I
is
love this
leadership to you?
question. I love this question because the biggest mistake I see in sales all the time is you take a high performer who's knocking it out of the park and the company wants to magnify that success. And so they say, we got to make them a manager. But
Mhm.
chances are that high performer was a high performer because they care about themselves really well. They might not care about others. So by asking that question, that very important question, and I did this with one of my leaders, I asked this woman once, she was working for me and she was stepping up. I had acquired a bunch of different parts of the business. They had all been put under me. They were all doing different things. They weren't connected. They didn't know what each other sold. Some of them didn't even know what their job was. But this one woman kind of stepped up and she says, I want to coach a couple of the people. Do you mind if I do that? Now, she was just an individual contributor, but this is what she asked. And I said, oh my gosh, I'd love it. And come back and tell me what you found out. So she came back and told me, she said, well, this person really does not understand her job. And I said, okay, well, let's get her on the phone and let's find out what's going on. And so we did. And it turns out she really didn't understand her job. She had come over from marketing. She just was dumped on us and was kind of lost. And we told her, listen, we've got your back. And I want you to understand your role, but if you run into any trouble, we're here to help. That empowered her so much. So this one woman who was stepping up to raise her hand and said, I want to help, I want to do this. I asked her one day, I said, Emma, has anyone ever asked you if you want to be a manager? She said, oh, Lyndsay, I would love to be a manager, but no one's ever asked. I said, well, I think you're incredible. I would love to give you that opportunity. And I promoted her and she got promoted many times over after that. But you have to have a willingness to want to see people win. And when you can look beyond your own success and you can share that spotlight, because you know, when you share the spotlight with someone else, it's a reflection on you. You're going to be great. And the people that are excellent coaches and can help see through an obstacle, they may not have been the best individual contributor, but they really recognize greatness in people. Those are the ones that you want to promote. Those are the people you want in the trenches. Those are the ones that are the problem solvers, that are listening and looking at talent. Those are the ones that you really want to tap on the shoulder for those leadership positions. But so often we get excited by the success and we're like, oh, that person, they're so good. We need to make them a manager so they can teach everyone everything. I had a rep once, Richie, and she crushed it. She was so good. She was making $1 million commission checks like almost every year. She was amazing. But she knew she had no interest in being a manager. Now, what do you do with a person like that? Well, you can have them teach a class. You can give them opportunities for advancement. You can create levels within their role so they can seek out promotions and do more. You can let them speak in front of the whole company. You can feature them on an all hands call. I mean, there's lots of ways to use that methodology. You don't just have to like keep them off to the side and let them do their thing. You know, you really can capitalize on it without having them be made a manager. If she was a manager, it would have been not a great recipe for success. So, and she knew that.
So Lyndsay, what's your next play? What's your move right now in the world?
Well, my move in the world,
or your focus.
My focus is, I like the question you asked me earlier, which was, you know, if people could create this role, you know, across the board for companies, that is a dream. That would be amazing. But really, I want to help change the fabric of companies to really watch them just absolutely knock it out of the park and do it in a way that these people are incredibly proud, incredibly satisfied and fulfilled because the leadership recognized what they were capable of. That to me is success. And, you know, the more people I can help, the more leaders I can help, that is my goal. So that's what I would love. Amazing. So whether it's speaking or coaching, that's really the thing that I think needs to change. And I think it's what employees are hungry for. So it's my hope that leaders are listening and they say, oh yeah, maybe it's time for that. I think I got to explore this a little and do right by my people.
Awesome. And so how can anyone find you?
Yeah, so my website is heartbeatforhire.com, pretty easy. And all of my socials are there. I'm on LinkedIn and TikTok and Insta and Facebook and YouTube. My podcast is also on YouTube. And you were a guest on my podcast, and that episode will be airing soon. So yeah, that's the best place to find me.
Awesome. Definitely check her out. Go to heartbeatforhire.com. Check out her podcast. She has some great guests. So Lyndsay, thank you so much for being here and sharing what you know and what you're doing. I think it's awesome, and I'm super glad that you're here.
Thanks, Richie. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Play podcast. If you liked the show, make sure to leave us a review. For more resources, visit relentlessuniversity.com or download the free Relentless University app. And if you're interested in having me speak at your next event, visit relentlessrichie.com. Until next time.